You know, the cloud applications are here to stay. They're not going away. Um, and as time progresses, I predict that cloud applications will actually eventually overtake desktop and server based applications. It's just kind of like the what's going to happen in the future. And eventually, small businesses, small law firms aren't going to have the need for servers anymore. So today, we're going to talk about the who, what, when, where, and why considering a cloud application for your law firm. And I'm talking about things like document management, billing and accounting, and so on and so forth. But before we get to that, if you're new to the show, I am Jim Guest, and this is No Law Firm Left Behind. Me and Vinny and Dave are here weekly to try to help your law firm be more competitive, for to help your attorneys and staff be more productive, and essentially help you get more clients at the end of the day. Uh, so I'm joined today by Vinny. Hi, Vinny. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Very good. I'm sitting here in my car. Actually, I'm out of town, but I didn't want to miss the show this week because we missed last week. I think this is a really important segment, the last one actually in this five-part series, talking about cloud applications. So, Vinny, the first question I've got for you
Yep.
is it's really, man, it's a big question. But what do you think one of the most important considerations should be when a law firm should consider a cloud based application? Now, I'm going to qualify that in lieu of moving from a desktop slash server based application.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most important things is why do you want to move to the cloud? You want to consider that. I think it's important to understand the why, so that you understand what the goal is for the application that you're trying to go for.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, there's the other big thing. There's another big thing that I think that you have to consider when you want to move to the application is, and that's functionality.
Mhm.
And functionality can include a lot of different things. But simply said, the functionality things like you know it, you need to compare features. You need to think about integrations with your current application with other applications as well. Make sure that stuff would work. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, you know what? Yeah, I think it's funny that you bring that, you say it the way you say it, because most people, when they go to look for an application to replace a desktop application, they're looking at price first. And I don't know, I just don't think that's the best thing to consider first
mm-hmm.
when you're considering replacing your desktop application with a cloud-based application.
Well, if you're looking at price only first, right?
Yeah.
You're not comparing apples to apples. First of all, right?
Yeah.
Desktop application doesn't take into consideration it's if you're buying a desktop application, basically you're buying licensing, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't take into consideration the fact that you have to have a server that you run it on, that you have to
Yeah.
maintain that server, right? That you have to repair and fix that server. It doesn't take into consideration things like internet speed that you have to have at the office for that application or ways to access it. It does, yeah, it covers the licensing per person, right? But there's a lot of other factors that go into the cloud, includes, right? When you're comparing one to the other. So comparing price from an on-site application to a cloud application is really not a fair comparison.
It's really not. It's really not. And so let's dig right down into some of the best practices, right? I think this is a great segue for it. Uh, so when we're called in and or we work with one of our law firm customers, and by the way, again, I always say this applies to law firms because we're talking about, like, we're on No Law Firm Left Behind. But it doesn't exclude the same conversation for nonprofits, manufacturers, and so any other industry.
Mm-hmm.
These considerations are all the same regardless. It's just that this is No Law Firm Left Behind. So,
Yeah.
Vinny, I made some notes for today's show. I thought it was important to get these bullet points out. Reasons to consider changing. What are some of the driving factors? Why would somebody, just you wake up on a Tuesday morning and say, "Hey, let's just move to a cloud based application"? it doesn't happen like that. What are some of the things that we see, the governing factors?
Reasons are people moving. Well, so people often consider this when they're moving locations, right?
Mhm.
And do they want to move all their stuff? If a server has to be replaced, and or the application is completely outdated. Um, Other things that people are when they're having trouble because there's too much downtime
Oh
or
my
the
gosh, yeah,
application, yeah, the
yeah.
application doesn't do something that they want it to do. And then cost savings. That's a big factor. Overall, when you consider everything that it takes to host an application yourself versus a cloud application, there really is a cost savings.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's another reason people are going to cloud applications as well.
I actually when I have to do a forecast for law firms, what I a lot of people look at the forecast and say, well, what is it today? What's the cost just now of comparing? So if I put a server in right now versus I get a cloud-based application, what does it cost right now? What I do a 6-year cost is what I do. And the reason I do a 6-year forecast is because in about 5 to 6 years, you should be replacing that server in that
Mhm.
5 to 6 years. So you have to look at replacing the server at least 2 times, right? I mean, you could look at it a lot more if you wanted to, but at least 2 times tells you the actual return on investment and total cost of ownership of having a server versus a cloud-based application. And what I found is that it's an interesting curve actually, because if the smaller the law firm is, the more justified they are at having that because you spread that cost out across less people. But as you get into the larger firms and mid-sized firms, the cost of having servers is greater, but the benefit isn't as much. It is great.
Mhm.
So, there's an interesting one. Did you, the other thing I thought it was good to mention is these application vendors, they sunset applications. They actually stop
Mhm.
supporting them. They, they have talent that they can't get any longer to develop to the applications, or they sell to somebody, and then that new company has to sunset the application because maybe they have a cloud-based application that they want to push instead. From a developer's perspective, it's a much better model for developers to have cloud-based applications than it is to have desktop server-based applications, because you always have everybody on the same platform always, and you're not
Mhm.
developing and fixing old versions. So, what about price considerations? What are some of the price considerations there, Vinny?
Yeah. So some of the things that I mentioned already, things like hard on premise, like you're hosting it yourself versus cloud
Mhm,
based,
mhm.
right? The cost of the support for that application, the cost of the licensing for that application, the cost of the server that houses that application, and the
Let me
network.
interrupt that for a second, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
because I want to differentiate here. Supporting the application has two costs.
Yep.
Okay, supporting your server has one cost, and so the two costs that I found: one, you got to pay for the support costs with the vendor, right? They all have support agreements, right?
Mhm.
And then you got to pay consultants like us to support that
Yep.
application too. Now the
Yep.
servers, you're paying for the ongoing on that. I just think it was important to discern support costs on the applications. There's twofold there.
Yep. And most of the time, for a lot of these, or for most of these applications, the support does not always include the upgrading and the new features for the as they develop that on-premise application. They want to sell you a new license, or they want to sell you an upgraded license, or whatever it is. There's a cost to do that, to maintain your systems, to make sure that they're staying up to date, that they're staying on par with other things that are getting automatically updated, like your Microsoft 365, for example. That gets automatically updated, or it's updated all the time, new feature, new functionality. And your applications that are integrated into that need to be able to keep up.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you eventually will fall into a situation where it's not compatible, and you have
Well,
to.
we have a law firm right now that we're dealing with that for right now. They've
Yeah.
got Windows 7 computers and a Windows 2008 server and an application that runs great in that environment. but
Mhm.
you know, they want to benefit
Yeah,
from better security. They want to benefit from the newer applications, and guess what?
they
They
can't.
need to upgrade. They can't do it, and
Yep,
and the cost is outrageous to do it. I mean,
yep,
to do it would it'll be a $20,000 project for them.
yeah.
So fortunately, we'll help them through that. The other thing I thought, Vinny, is as we're talking about this, some consultants charge more per hour to help you on an older application than on newer applications because the expertise, it's a supply and demand on older applications. There's less supply, you know,
Yeah,
and so
we
we
don't
don't.
do that, but
Yeah,
I have seen that. Yep,
yeah, yeah,
yep.
yeah. I
Because I
agree.
mean, just finding the resource to do it costs more because it's an
Yeah.
older application.
What about
But
the
there, I mean, there's other soft costs that you don't consider, like for example, um, a backing up the software. Right?
Mm,
There's a cost to back things up. There's licensing for the if you're doing it on site, if you're taking it off site, there's costs to do that, um, and just so there's a lot of factors involved in maintaining your own system, hosting your own applications.
yeah,
That are in addition to just, hey, I'm going to compare the license cost to my application to the license cost of a cloud-based application.
no, and that
Right?
doesn't even take into consideration cost of securing it, cost of the real cost of downtime with it. When it's down, it's your responsibility, and you got to pay somebody to get it back up and running.
Yeah.
Not only do you lose not only do you lose productivity with your staff, but you also lose that that money that you spend to get it running. So, tell me about some of the cost considerations of cloud-based applications.
Obviously, yeah, if you're moving to a cloud-based application, there's the cost of implementing it.
Mhm.
There's a ramp-up cost for your people as they learn it and they get
Yeah,
trained in it,
yeah,
right?
that's productivity.
So that's productivity. There's a learning curve there, and it's that productivity always goes up over time, right? But there's going to be
Yeah,
that time where they're still learning it,
you're
and
a busy guy today.
they're still trying to figure it out. So
Yeah, yeah.
um, the sorry, I'm in the
Yeah, you're a
office and
busy
I'm
guy.
getting a
Hey,
call,
nobody can
and
complain about you being busy. We appreciate your time today, Vinny.
I'm gonna put this on.
Just turn it all the way down. There you go. So, one of the other things is some of the things you have to consider, and it's not exactly a cost, but you got to kind of put it in your calculations. It's not apples to apples. You don't get everything converting over from an old system into a new system, right? The data in a new system may not be exactly the same as the data in an old system. So you may have to leave some things behind, right? And what do we do in those situations if we have to leave things behind, Benny?
But I mean, but that cost, I would argue that that would be the same whether you're going to a new on-premise solution or a cloud-based solution. That
Yeah,
anytime you upgrade, that's always a factor, right?
yeah, yeah,
And the 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 things that come with that are you might have to have a new process. You might have to have a new way of doing things, and there's a cost to that because people are learning new ways to do things.
Mhm.
But I mean, even if I decided to upgrade my on-premise, there may be functionality that we had in an old system, and there's plenty of vendors that retire functionality.
Yeah.
So that could be a cost on either side, in my opinion.
It could be a productivity cost. I would also mention that whenever you do consider moving to a cloud-based application, it is inexpensive to keep a virtual cold stored server for you to boot it up, log into the old system, grab some information out of it, and cut it down. That's a minimal cost, but should be considered, should be in the calculation too, if you ask me. What about downtime, Vinny, when it comes to cloud-based applications? What do we do?
So as far as downtime, there's a much less chance when you have a cloud application because that's the whole advantage.
Yeah,
They have farms of servers that are dedicated to making sure and engineers and such to make sure that there's minimal downtime. In fact, they have guarantees in most cases of a certain amount of uptime, right?
Yeah.
And they put it in their contracts. And so, um, when there's something down, you're calling one person, and you're getting it addressed there, right?
Yeah.
And they're handling it, and most of the time they know it before you do,
Yeah.
because they have
And
the good monitoring in place and such.
here's and listen, I'm gonna be one of a prospect of one of our prospects that we deal with. That brand new. We've never dealt with them before. We're telling them they should consider a cloud-based application, Cosmolex, Net Documents. Who knows, right? Whatever applications out there, QuickBooks Online, or any number of nonprofit CRM applications like Dynamics. And they look at it and they say, that's all fine and good, but what about when the internet goes down?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's always a question I get, right? What happens if the internet goes down? Well, with today's the way we work today, you pack up and you go home, and you can work from home because it's in the cloud, right?
Yeah,
Or you can function from your phone. Most phones, they either have a hotspot, or these applications work. They have an app that you can use off your
yeah,
phone.
yeah.
The work from anywhere is the easiest function. Is the easiest answer to that, though. Your internet's down. It's going to be down for you've confirmed it's been going to be down for a certain amount of time, and so you just pack up and go home and work from home. It's just like as if you were in the office.
And it's just like voice over IP, hosted voice over IP solutions, phone solutions, right? You don't need internet anymore you need an internet connection, just not the one at the office necessarily. And there's also the possibility of redundant internet connections because they're getting less and less expensive. So a backup internet connection could cost you $129 a month. Yeah, that's a cost, but look at you got to put that in your calculation for your savings.
Yeah.
And so, Vinny, the other thing I like to mention is, what do we do when the electricity goes off? Oh, we lost your video, Vinny. What do we do when the electricity goes off? Right? Um, we don't really get freaked out like we do when our servers die. Okay, it's a different kind of mentality, right? When you have a cloud based application that is not accessible, the freak out factor is lower because you kind of have a mindset of they're like the power company. They're working on getting it back up and running as fast as they possibly can because that's what they do is they provide that service.
Hmm.
And so, yes, your hands are tied. Sometimes there are workarounds for it, but you have a different mentality with cloud-based applications, and the stress levels generally are lower, right? I'm not saying they're non-existent, okay? Because if you got a court deadline and you got to make that deadline and you need some information out of an application, a document or some information out of a data field, you need it, right? I get that, but it's
I,
like
I I can tell you though that from experience, and we have a lot of years of, and so do you, Jim, of
yeah,
supporting cloud-based applications now. It's not something new, right? Downtime is usually minimal. It's going to be much less. You're going to have much less downtime with a cloud application than you ever will with your own hosted application.
they spend millions and millions of dollars where most businesses, generally speaking, barely spend $100,000 a year on this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, you're right, and it really helps. So okay, so let's kind of round this up by talking about some functionality, right? I like to
Mhm.
talk about it. Now we talked about cost, a lot of cost, right?
Mhm.
But if I'm considering cloud-based applications, do we have a method to evaluate to get that to an apples to apples versus an apples to orange comparison?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely it requires someone to do an evaluation and sit down with you, talk about the what your current system is, what is the functionality that you actually use out of that system, and what you don't use.
Hmm.
I always like to ask, what is the most important thing for a role? So you really got to break it down by role. What is the most important thing for that role? And that's how you start going down the path of answering. Okay, that functionality in the new system or is it not? Right, and you can just continue going down that path. But really, it really requires sitting down at the way you work today. How do you use your system today to determine what the next steps are, what the best applications to suit your needs are, and it cannot. If you're going from one brand to another, and sometimes even when you're going from one brand to the same brand, hosted versus cloud, there's still going to be functionality that's going to be missing. I can tell you, and one example is you have QuickBooks on premise. There's a server or software installed on your computer. There's functionality in that that's not on the cloud-based product, right? And so even when you're going from one vendor to the same vendor in the cloud, there's going to be things that they've deprecated or they've just removed or they don't support in the cloud. And so um, it's very important that investigation piece not get skipped or not get skimmed. It,
Cheated.
it's
Effectively cheating it. You can't
yeah.
cheat that part. Not at all. Vinny, I like to actually say, I'll give a very specific example. So here I am on my desktop server-based application, my on-premise application, and I do invoicing, and that's really important to me. But invoicing is a big thing, right? Okay. Can I modify the bills? How does the bill come out? Does the bill come out different for each company? Or do all of my bills look all the same for all of my customers? Do I email them the bill? Does it automatically do that for me? Does it print? Does it give them a payment gateway, right? And so you look at those functionalities and you say, okay, I use that. I use that. I would like to use that, but I never have. Okay. Or it doesn't have that functionality. It can't invoice emails. And then I look at my cloud-based application and I look at those very specific things that are important to us. And I put a checkbox next to them and I say, oh, but it can email invoices over here. That's something that maybe can save me a lot of time because now I don't have to print out bills and mail them anymore, or at least a significant uh, amount of them. So it's a time savings. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of analysis that I say dig into each of them and bring out the salient points of it. We gotta haves, we'd like to haves, and we don't needs.
Yep. One important thing is also to consider as you're going through this evaluation is that just because you've been doing it a specific way, it doesn't mean it's the right way, and it doesn't mean it's the best way, right? The new system may not have the functionality, but it may have something better or more efficient, right? Or there may be another process that may need to be considered. Companies are reluctant to change their processes when they change their applications, right?
Very
Um,
much
but
so.
um, but it's important to have that in your mind as you're going through this evaluation. So, okay, I know we've been doing it this way. It's gonna have to change, and it's for the better.
Yeah, yeah. So listen, to round the show up, I've got some spreadsheets that I put together. We will happily send them to you if you land on this stream or listen to the podcast. By all means, I'd love you to ask for those. I'm happy to send them out. Um, if you're not a member of No Law Firm Left Behind on LinkedIn, this is our group. Take a picture of this with your phone. It's much easier than to try to write it down right now. Sorry, it's not a pretty URL. Like I say every week, LinkedIn, give us pretty URLs for our groups. That would be awesome. But however, Vinny and I and Dave are always happy to answer questions when it comes to evaluating this and other strategies to move to the cloud and so on and so forth for your business technology. So listen, Vinny, thanks a lot for joining. I want to pop this up here in the corner so everybody has this link, the QR code to follow our podcast. But if you're catching us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, you'll see the links for this also down in the description. So again, Vinny, thanks a lot. Great show. Really appreciate the topic.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone.